Commander Vex 9 watched the human cadets arrive, cataloging them as Category 2 primitives. Their varied physiques and apparent lack of galactic combat experience made them seem harmless. But when Colonel Sarah Chen calmly stated no powers in combat, she replied with words that would redefine galactic warfare forever. That was me holding back. You know what the first thing I noticed was? Their physical inconsistency. I watched the Council observers scan the new human cadets during intake processing. The assessment team documented every variation in bone structure, muscle mass, and metabolic rate. They cataloged height differences up to 23% across the group. The medical scanners flagged biological anomalies nobody could explain. Different blood types, varying lung capacities, even divergent nerve cluster placements. The observers logged each divergence as another weakness in their reports. The lead assessor from the Galactic Integration Bureau made notes about evolutionary flaws. He claimed such broad physical diversity meant humans lacked species cohesion. I watched his team compare muscle fiber density against standard Gellian warrior benchmarks. The Gellians maintain 98% physical uniformity across their entire military. When the scans showed human cadets falling 30% below Gellian baselines, the observers actually laughed. They dismissed the results as primitive physiological development. Their assessment extended to historical records. The Council archivists reviewed Earth's military history files. They found records of approximately 15,000 separate armed conflicts across human history. The classification AI categorized everyone as primitive tribal skirmishes. The reports noted the absence of energy weapons, orbital strikes, or genetic enhancement programs. The final integration recommendation declared human warfare tactics unworthy of galactic notice. The Council's protocol operates on a fundamental assumption: uniformity equals strength. All advanced species in the Federation show minimal physical variation. Their warriors train from identical genetic templates. Their ships follow standardized designs. Variety gets classified as chaos in their operational handbooks. The assessment team never considered that different environments might require different adaptations. That's when I saw Cadet Martinez's eyes track the security drone. The observation deck had 18 stealth drones monitoring the intake area. This particular unit hovered near the ceiling, using active camouflage and noise dampening. None of the observers even noticed its presence. But Martinez's head turned exactly 7 degrees. Her eyes locked onto the drone's position through its camouflage field. Her focus became absolute, predatory. She tracked its movement for 3 full seconds before returning to attention. I pulled up her file. It listed her as a logistics specialist from an agricultural colony. The psychological evaluation described her as calm and methodical with no combat instincts. Her physical scores placed her in the bottom quartile of human cadets. Nothing in her documentation explained how she spotted a drone that our own sensors could barely detect. Her file showed a Category 2 primitive. Her actions showed something entirely different. The Council's metrics measure what they understand. They have scales for strength, speed, and energy output. They can quantify shield capacity and weapons yield. Their systems can't measure adaptability because they've never needed to. Every species they've encountered follows predictable evolutionary paths. Humans break every pattern they've established. Their diversity isn't weakness. It's contingency planning at the species level. The assessment team finished their reports just as the combat instructor called for demonstrations. They recommended placement in basic training tracks with increased monitoring. The lead assessor suggested keeping humans separated from other cadets to avoid contamination of proper military disciplines. His final note questioned whether humans could ever advance beyond Category 2 status. The demonstration area opened with the shriek of hydraulic doors. The human cadets moved toward the arena with a calm that seemed unnatural for primitives. They showed no visible anxiety about facing unknown combat protocols. Martinez walked near the back of the group, her eyes still occasionally flicking toward ceiling corners where other hidden sensors waited. Then the Voran attack sirens began wailing. Let me tell you about the silence that followed the no powers rule. The combat arena fell into a stillness so complete I could hear the hum of the thermal scanners. Colonel Chen stood at perfect attention while alien cadets from 7 species began activating their combat enhancements. Gellian warriors grew shimmering energy fields around their fists. Voran cadets extended bioluminescent tendrils that crackled with plasma. The Xylos shifted into phased states where light bent around their forms. Every non-human participant demonstrated some form of biological or technological augmentation, except the humans. Commander Vex 9 watched from the observation deck with that familiar look of disappointed expectation. I saw him make notations on his datapad about physiological limitations. He interpreted human stillness as evolutionary deficiency rather than tactical choice. His report later described their lack of visible enhancements as primitive biological constraints. He wrote that humans apparently lacked the capacity for energy manipulation or adaptive mutation. The assessment completely missed what I was seeing on my monitor. I recorded the thermal readings myself through the observation deck's bioscanners. The human cadets showed near-total physiological control that defied standard metrics. Their core body temperatures remained within a 1-degree variance despite the rising tension in the arena. Heart rate monitors displayed rhythms so consistent they might have been medical training simulations. Cadet Martinez maintained 58 beats per minute with 0 arrhythmia. Cadet Thompson showed respiratory patterns suggesting advanced meditative control. Their breathing remained rhythmic and deep, while alien cadets exhibited elevated stress indicators. Gallian warriors showed 15% increases in adrenal output. Varan cadets displayed erratic biosignatures as their plasma tendrils activated. The human vitals looked like they were monitoring patients in recovery rooms rather than combatants preparing for demonstration. The biological data told a story the visual assessment completely missed. Alien observers around me whispered theories about physiological limitations. A Xylos technician suggested humans might lack proper nerve clusters for energy projection. A Gellian officer speculated they might be oxygen-limited like some aquatic species. The assessment team lead commented that primitive species often show reduced stress responses because they lack cognitive capacity to recognize danger. They were analyzing absence without considering restraint. That's when Colonel Chen spoke the line that changed everything. She didn't raise her voice or adopt a combat stance. She simply turned her head toward the observation deck and spoke into her comm unit. Her transmission came through clear on our monitors despite the growing energy disturbances in the arena. She said their cooperation wasn't preparation for deployment, it was the deployment itself. She explained that human military training focuses on maintaining operational capacity under any conditions rather than accessing special abilities. She said their ability to function as a coordinated unit without enhanced communication or energy fields represented their actual combat capability. The silent coordination, the maintained vitals, the complete absence of visible stress indicators, these weren't signs of limitation. They were demonstrations of a species that operates under permanent psychological and physiological restraint. Their normal state represents what other species achieve only through intense concentration or technological assistance. What does operating at 10% capacity really mean? It means their baseline represents a controlled state of permanent restraint. Human soldiers trained to maintain combat effectiveness while consciously suppressing 90% of their potential response capacity. Their standard operational protocols assume they will encounter situations requiring escalation rather than depletion. They don't need to power up for combat. They need to power down from their normal restrained state. The implications became clear as I watched the bio readings. Their comm wasn't absence of capability, it was conservation of resources. Their uniform reactions weren't lack of individuality, they were drilled coordination at the neurological level. Their apparent physical limitations weren't evolutionary shortcomings, they were deliberate adaptations to prevent accidental damage to themselves and their environment. The assessment team was measuring the safety protocols and calling them limitations. Meanwhile, the Voron attack sirens began wailing through the station's comm system. The sound should have triggered panic responses across all species according to our emergency protocols. The alien cadets immediately broke formation, their energy fields flickering as attention shifted to the new threat. The human cadets didn't move. Their heart rates didn't change. Their breathing patterns held steady. They simply turned their heads toward Colonel Chen and waited. The first time a cadet pulled out a smartphone, we thought it was a communication device. Cadet Thompson reached into his uniform pocket during a tactical briefing and retrieved a flat rectangular object. The device had a glass surface that glowed with soft light. I watched him swipe his fingers across it while the Varan attack coordinator explained shield penetration tactics. The alien tech specialists monitoring the session immediately focused their scanners on the object. Their initial assessment classified it as primitive crystalline circuitry with limited processing capacity. Our technology evaluation team dismissed the device as a simple communicator. They noted the absence of biolinks or neural interfaces. The scanning reports showed basic semiconductor architecture that matched Earth's technological development level. The assessment concluded humans still relied on manual input devices rather than direct brain-machine interfaces. The specialists wrote it off as another example of human technological inferiority. They missed the complete picture of what they were observing. Their scanners couldn't decode the operating system because it wasn't biolinked. The device operated on a completely different principle than galactic technology. Our systems are designed to interface with biological neural patterns. Human technology developed along separate lines, externalized intelligence augmentation rather than integrated enhancement. The scanning team reported encryption protocols that resisted all standard analysis methods. They assumed this indicated primitive security measures rather than advanced unfamiliar architecture. I watched Cadet Thompson run 17 tactical simulations simultaneously on that device. The screen divided into multiple windows showing different battle scenarios. He manipulated them with finger gestures that seemed too simple for the complexity unfolding. Each simulation displayed real-time calculations of energy consumption, structural integrity, and tactical outcomes. He cross-referenced atmospheric data from the station's sensors with historical Varan attack patterns. The device processed atmospheric composition, pressure gradients, and thermal layers against known Varan combat behaviors. He completed the analysis in seconds. The device correlated 73 variables across 3 separate databases. It identified 17 potential attack vectors the Varans might use based on current environmental conditions. The results included probability percentages for each scenario and recommended countermeasures. Our Academy mainframe took 4 minutes and 17 seconds to process the same dataset. The difference wasn't processing speed, it was architectural. The human device worked on distributed parallel processing, while our systems used centralized computation. Their Academy mainframe took minutes to process what his device did instinctively. The mainframe had to access separate databases, run verification protocols, and maintain security firewalls. Thompson's device maintained local copies of essential data and used predictive algorithms to anticipate needed information. It didn't query databases, it already contained them. The mainframe processed information. The device applied intelligence. This distinction became critical when we realized the scale of what humans carried in their pockets. That's when they explained every human carries at least one of these. Colonel Chen noticed our observation team focusing on Thompson's device. She explained that smartphones are standard issue for all human military personnel. They're not just communicators, they're individual command centers. Each device contains processing power that exceeds early orbital defense computers. They store tactical databases, historical records, and predictive algorithms. The network connectivity allows them to share processing power and information instantly. They call it a phone, but it's really a distributed neural network. The terminology misdirected us completely. We thought phone meant communication device. For humans, it means portable intelligence augmentation system. Each device learns from its users' patterns and preferences. They network together to form emergent intelligence structures. A group of human soldiers with smartphones creates an ad hoc supercomputer without centralized control. The system is fault-tolerant, adaptable, and constantly evolving. How does a smartphone change understanding of human tech? It proves their strength lies in ubiquitous networked intelligence, not isolated supercomputers. Galactic technology focuses on building larger and more powerful central systems. Humans went the opposite direction. They put computing power in every individual's hands. Their technological advantage doesn't come from having better supercomputers. It comes from having 7 billion reasonably powerful computers that can network instantly. The system scales perfectly and has no single point of failure. The implications became clear as Thompson continued his analysis. He shared his findings with other cadets through their devices. Within 30 seconds, all human personnel had updated tactical assessments. They didn't need to access station systems or request information from command. Each cadet became an intelligence node in a self-organizing network. The speed of their adaptation exceeded anything in galactic military doctrine. They operated like a swarm, decentralized, responsive, and incredibly efficient. Meanwhile, the fabrication units started humming throughout the station. The sound began as a low vibration through the deck plates. It built into a steady mechanical rhythm that indicated mass production activation. The humans had accessed the manufacturing systems without triggering any security alerts. Their devices had interfaced with the fabricator control systems through non-standard protocols. The units began producing items that didn't match any known weapon or tool schematics in our databases. The production logs showed chemical compounds and mechanical components being assembled in strange configurations. You know what Earth's evaluators really did? They showed exactly what we expected. The Galactic Scout teams visited Earth over 17 times during the assessment period. They observed military exercises, weapons demonstrations, and strategic planning sessions. Every time the humans displayed the same technologies: tank divisions, fighter jets, naval fleets. They showed ground troops with projectile weapons and armored vehicles with conventional explosives. The Scouts filed reports describing human warfare as mechanically advanced, but tactically primitive. They documented everything they saw without questioning what they didn't see. Galactic Scouts only observed tank battles and jet fighters, what they classified as advanced warfare. They watched massive armored divisions maneuver across training grounds. They documented aircraft engaging in dogfight simulations with missile launches and evasive maneuvers. The assessment teams noted the absence of energy weapons, telepathic coordination, or biological enhancements. Their reports concluded that humans had reached their technological ceiling with kinetic weapons and combustion propulsion. The files contained extensive analysis of shell velocity, armor penetration rates, and aerodynamic efficiency. They completely missed the absence of cyber warfare units, electronic warfare specialists, or information operations teams. Humans deliberately hid cyber warfare, psychological ops, and economic tactics. I accessed the real historical files weeks after the battle. The actual records showed centuries of development in non-kinetic warfare. They had entire military branches dedicated to information operations that never appeared in the demonstrations. Their cyber warfare capabilities included network infiltration tools that could disable planetary defense grids, psychological operations units specialized in cultural manipulation, and mass perception management. Economic warfare divisions could collapse alien economies through targeted market manipulation. None of this appeared in the Scout reports. I accessed the real files later through back-channel sources after security protocols relaxed. The true depth of their deception became apparent page by page. Their history wasn't just a record of conflicts. It was a masterclass in information control. They had entire departments dedicated to managing external perceptions. The files showed deliberate campaigns to present specific images to galactic observers while concealing actual capabilities. They crafted their primitive reputation with the same precision they applied to weapons development. They let us believe their admission to the Academy was about learning our ways. The official diplomatic requests emphasized knowledge exchange and technological advancement. Their applications stressed the desire to understand galactic military doctrines and integrate with Federation standards. The Council approved their admission based on the assumption they needed to learn from advanced species. The reality was completely different. The humans weren't there to learn. They were there to analyze. That's when I realized their cadets were mapping our defense grids through Academy systems. I reviewed the access logs from the training simulations. Every exercise the humans participated in generated massive data requests from their terminals. They weren't just running the scenarios. They were reverse engineering the underlying systems. Their simulation participation rates showed patterns that matched intelligence-gathering operations rather than training exercises. They used every accessible terminal to probe network architectures and security protocols. Every simulation they ran taught them how we think, how we react, how we fail. The after-action reports showed consistent analysis of alien decision-making patterns. The human cadets documented response times, tactical preferences, and psychological triggers across multiple species. They compiled databases on Gellian aggression thresholds, Voran tactical inflexibility, Xylos risk aversion patterns. Their training sessions became intelligence collection operations masked as educational participation. They learned our weaknesses while we studied their apparent limitations. Their primitive status was the perfect camouflage for the greatest intelligence operation in history. The Council allocated minimal security resources to monitoring human activities because they seemed harmless. The observation teams focused on more advanced species that presented obvious threats. Security protocols assumed technological sophistication indicated danger potential. The humans operated beneath all detection thresholds because they appeared exactly as primitive as we expected them to be. Their deception wasn't just successful, it was invisible. What was Earth's real strategy? To become the galaxy's immune system, by first understanding every pathogen, the files revealed a long-term plan that extended far beyond military defense. Human strategists viewed the galaxy as an ecosystem requiring protection. They intended to position themselves as guardians who could identify and neutralize threats before they endangered civilizations. Their intelligence gathering served a protective purpose rather than conquest ambition. They wanted to understand every potential danger to prevent conflicts rather than win them. The scale of their operation became clear as I cross-referenced their activities. Each cadet specialized in different aspects of galactic systems. Some focused on military protocols while others studied economic structures or cultural frameworks. They shared information through their network devices, building a comprehensive model of galactic society. Their smartphones became data collection nodes in a distributed intelligence network. The operation wasn't centralized. It emerged from coordinated individual actions. Meanwhile, Voran ships breached the outer perimeter of the station's defense grid. The tactical displays showed 3 battle cruisers approaching through the asteroid belt. Their weapon systems activated with the characteristic energy signatures of plasma torpedoes. Standard defense protocols called for raising shield emitters and activating point defense systems. The station's AI began calculating intercept trajectories and damage probabilities. The Vorans moved into attack formation with the precision of countless previous engagements. I heard Colonel Chen say something that chilled me to my core. The battle alarms flashed crimson across the council chamber viewports as she stood perfectly still before the assembled delegates. Voran torpedo trails streaked past the observation windows like angry comets. The station's defensive shields glowed orange under impacts that rattled the deck plates beneath our feet. Council members from 12 species gripped their consoles with varying expressions of panic. Only Chen remained motionless, her eyes tracking the battle outside with clinical detachment. The High Chancellor of the Galactic Council demanded answers through the emergency comm system. His voice cracked with stress as he asked why humanity wanted to join a war that didn't concern them. He listed the resources expended on their training, the risks of inviting unknowns into secure facilities, the diplomatic complications of involving a new species in established conflicts. His questions echoed the suspicions running through the observation deck. Every species in the Federation had clear motives for engagement: territory disputes, resource claims, historical grievances. The humans had presented none of these. She didn't speak of resources or territory or conquest. Her response cut through the alarm sirens with unsettling calm. She explained that human history contained no records of interstellar conflict because they hadn't encountered other species until recently. Their military development occurred in isolation against threats both internal and environmental. She described how they fought diseases that wiped out populations, natural disasters that destroyed cities, and their own internal conflicts that threatened species extinction. Their warfare evolved not against other civilizations, but against existence itself. She said humans looked at the universe and decided it wasn't hostile enough. The statement hung in the air as another torpedo impact shook the chamber. Delegates exchanged confused glances while emergency lights strobed across their faces. She elaborated that human psychology developed through constant confrontation with impossible odds. Their planet tried to kill them daily with earthquakes, storms, and predators. Their own technology threatened to destroy them through accidents or warfare. They survived by becoming more resilient than any threat they faced. The galaxy, with its organized wars and rule-based conflicts, seemed almost tame by comparison. Their entire evolution prepared them to fight the unreasonable, the monstrous, the inevitable. She described how human warriors train to face opponents who don't follow rules or respect conventions. Their tactical manuals contain chapters on combating enemies who use biological weapons, break ceasefires, and target civilian populations. Their military history shows constant adaptation to adversaries who cheat, deceive, and employ unimaginable cruelty. They developed these capabilities not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Survival demanded preparing for worst-case scenarios that other species couldn't conceive. That's when I understood their purpose wasn't to win wars, but to end threats. The distinction became crystal clear as she spoke. Other species fight for advantage, territory, or resources. They conduct warfare as an extension of politics with rules and limitations. Humans approach conflict as a problem requiring permanent solutions. They don't seek temporary victories or negotiated settlements. Their military doctrine focuses on complete threat elimination through any means necessary. Their concept of victory involves making sure the same threat never appears again. They don't seek victory. They seek permanent solutions. She explained that human warriors measure success by the peace that follows conflict, not the territory gained during fighting. Their historical records show countless examples of conflicts that ended with the complete dismantling of threatening systems, rather than temporary advantages. They would rather spend resources on permanent solutions than maintain standing armies for continuous conflict. This approach seemed alien to species accustomed to endless border skirmishes and seasonal warfare. Why do humans want to stand between the galaxy and danger? Because their identity is built on protecting others, not dominating them. Chen's words finally made sense of their apparent contradictions. Their physical diversity represented different environmental adaptations. Their technological development focused on distributed protection rather than centralized power. Their military training emphasized restraint and control. Everything about them suggested a species that evolved as guardians rather than conquerors. They saw the galaxy not as territory to claim, but as something precious to protect. The psychological profiles I accessed later confirmed this orientation. Human satisfaction metrics show peak fulfillment when performing protective functions rather than acquisitive ones. Their historical heroes are predominantly defenders rather than conquerors. Their cultural narratives celebrate sacrifice for others more than personal achievement. Their entire value system revolves around protection and preservation. This explained why they showed no interest in territorial gains or resource claims. They wanted positions where they could prevent harm rather than cause it. The council members fell silent as the implications settled. Emergency lights continued to flash across their faces, but the panic had receded. They were looking at humanity through an entirely new lens. The primitive categorization, the physical limitations, the technological simplicity, all of it now appeared as deliberate understatement rather than actual deficiency. They weren't seeing a species trying to catch up to galactic standards. They were witnessing a civilization with completely different standards entirely. Then the lead Voran cruiser locked torpedoes on the council chamber. The targeting lasers painted the viewports with deadly precision. The ship's weapons glowed with building energy that promised immediate destruction. Emergency systems automatically activated the chamber's blast shields. But everyone knew standard shields wouldn't withstand a direct hit from capital ship torpedoes. The delegates froze in place, their species' various fear responses playing out across their features. Chen simply tilted her head and spoke a single word into her comm. "Let me tell you how they weaponized a maintenance bay." The station's defensive shields glowed orange under continuous torpedo impacts, while emergency lights strobed through the corridors. I followed the human cadets as they moved toward Maintenance Sector 7. They didn't head for the armory or defensive positions like standard protocol demanded. Instead, they entered a standard equipment bay filled with fabrication units and environmental control systems. The area contained nothing that should have been useful against capital ships. Voran shields were impervious to our phased energy weapons. Our tactical displays showed the battle unfolding outside. The lead cruiser's defensive screens absorbed plasma bursts and kinetic impacts without visible strain. Standard Federation weapons technology relies on energy projection and kinetic penetration. Voran ships specialize in defending against these conventional attacks. Their layered shield systems can dissipate massive energy concentrations and deflect projectile weapons. Our best weapons were achieving less than 3% shield degradation per volley. Their methane-oxygen atmosphere required precise environmental controls. I watched the humans access the station's technical database through their smartphones. They pulled up Voran environmental specifications that even our tactical teams hadn't consulted. The files showed exact atmospheric requirements for Voran physiology: 68% methane, 30% oxygen, 2% trace gases maintained within 0.05% variance. Their life support systems needed to maintain this balance precisely to prevent crew incapacitation. Even minor fluctuations could cause physiological stress. I watched the humans bypass 17 safety protocols in under 3 seconds. Cadet Thompson connected his device to the fabrication unit's control interface. The system security should have required command authorization for any modification to production cycles. His fingers moved across the screen in patterns that didn't match any access procedure I recognized. Security alerts flashed on my monitor and then disappeared as he bypassed each layer of protection. The fabrication unit's status indicators shifted from standby to active without the usual authorization sequences. They reprogrammed fabricators to produce potassium permanganate and glycerol. The material synthesis display showed chemical formulas instead of weapon schematics. The units began processing base elements into crystalline solids and viscous liquids. Production metrics indicated they were manufacturing these compounds in kilogram quantities. The fabrication system wasn't designed for chemical production. It normally created mechanical components and replacement parts. The humans had rewritten its core programming to prioritize chemical synthesis over mechanical fabrication. That's when I realized they weren't making weapons. They were making chemical reactions. The compounds they selected have specific properties when combined. Potassium permanganate serves as a powerful oxidizer, while glycerol acts as a reducing agent. When mixed in proper proportions, they undergo spontaneous combustion without external ignition sources. The reaction produces intense heat and flame that water cannot extinguish. The humans weren't building projectile weapons or energy projectors. They were creating conditions for chemical fires. Their plan ignored ship armor entirely, targeting the air the Vorans breathed. I accessed the environmental control schematics for Voran ships through the station's database. Their life support systems pull external atmosphere through filtration units before distributing it shipwide. The systems are designed to scrub contaminants and maintain precise gas ratios. The humans had identified the exact intake ports and filtration sequences. Their strategy bypassed shields, armor, and defensive systems completely. They aimed at the one thing every ship must bring inside its defenses: breathable air. They turned life support into a delivery system for fire. The fabrication units completed production of both compounds simultaneously. The humans loaded the materials into standard maintenance drones normally used for hull repairs. They programmed the drones to approach the Voran ship's atmospheric intake vents. The drones would release the compounds directly into the environmental processing systems. Once inside the filtration units, the chemicals would mix with the methane-oxygen atmosphere. The resulting reaction would spread through the ventilation systems to every compartment. How do they turn fabrication units into weapons? By understanding enemy biology, better than the enemy understands their own tech. The Vorans designed their ships around military considerations: shield strength, weapon yield, armor thickness. They assumed any attack would come through conventional means. The humans approached the problem from a biological perspective. They studied what the Vorans needed to survive rather than what they used to fight. This perspective shift allowed them to identify vulnerabilities that didn't appear on standard tactical analyses. The maintenance bay hummed with activity as the fabrication units worked. Chemical storage containers filled with crystalline purple powder and clear viscous liquid. The humans coordinated the loading process with efficiency that suggested prior training. They didn't speak much, just exchanged nods and hand signals while working. Their movements were economical and precise. They treated the emergency situation with the calm focus of technicians performing routine maintenance. The drones launched through emergency airlocks normally used for debris clearance. They moved toward the Voran ships on minimal power signatures that didn't trigger weapon targeting systems. The battle continued around them with energy weapons flashing and torpedoes streaking past. The drones looked like insignificant debris compared to the capital ships exchanging fire. Their approach vectors took them directly toward the environmental intake vents on the ship's undersides. The lead cruiser's intake systems activated as the drones approached. Standard procedure calls for increased atmosphere processing during combat operations to handle possible contamination from battle damage. The vents opened wider to pull in more volume for filtering. The drones moved into position and released their chemical payloads directly into the airflow. The Voran filtration systems pulled the compounds inside along with the external atmosphere. The process happened silently amid the chaos of battle. Meanwhile, the third battlecruiser moved to flank position. It executed a standard tactical maneuver to attack the station from a different vector. Its weapons charged as it came around the asteroid field. The ship's commanders apparently hadn't noticed the drones approaching their sister ship. Their focus remained on the main battle and the station's defensive emplacements. The flanking movement took them through an area where chemical residue from the first drone deployment hung in space. The third ship's environmental systems activated as it maneuvered. Its intake vents opened to maintain atmospheric balance during the high G turn. The ship passed through the chemical cloud left by the first drone deployment. Microscopic particles of potassium, permanganate, and glycerol entered the ventilation system. The filtration units processed them along with the normal atmosphere. The compounds mixed inside the environmental controls in the same proportions the humans had calculated. The strangest thing I witnessed was the Rick Astley protocol. Cadet Martinez remained at her station while battle alerts flashed across every screen. Her hands moved across the communication console with a calm precision that seemed entirely disconnected from the emergency unfolding outside the viewports. She didn't access weapon systems or defensive controls. Instead, she brought up an archival database tagged with 20th century Earth cultural artifacts. The selection seemed so bizarre, I initially assumed she'd accessed the wrong directory during the stress of combat. Voran AI systems prioritized emergency communications above all else. Their military protocol requires immediate response to any distress signal or emergency transmission. This design philosophy stems from their collective defense doctrines, where damaged ships must receive immediate assistance. The systems automatically open communication channels to any signal broadcasting on emergency frequencies. This protocol overrides normal security measures during combat situations to prevent delayed response to actual emergencies. The Vorans consider this a strength of their tactical systems. Their ships automatically open channels to any distress signal. The communication arrays on Voran vessels constantly monitor all standard emergency bands. When they detect a transmission on these frequencies, their systems automatically establish a connection and prioritize that signal over other communications. The AI assigns highest processing priority to these channels, under the assumption they contain critical tactical information or requests for assistance. This automatic response occurs without crew intervention to ensure fastest possible reaction times during combat. I watched Cadet Martinez upload a 20th century music file to the comms array. The file metadata showed it was an audio recording from 1987 by an artist named Rick Astley. The title appeared as Never Gonna Give You Up, with additional tags indicating it was a popular cultural phenomenon from Earth's late 20th century. She configured the transmission parameters to broadcast on every Voran emergency frequency simultaneously. The communication system showed the file preparing for transmission across 17 separate emergency bands. She broadcasted on every Voran emergency frequency simultaneously. The transmission began with a distinctive opening beat pattern followed by vocal tracks. The audio quality was surprisingly clear despite its age. The signal went out across all standard Voran military emergency channels. Our monitoring systems showed the transmission hitting the lead cruiser's communication arrays first. The ship's systems immediately prioritized the signal according to standard protocols. Communication traffic logs showed the emergency channels taking precedence over all other transmissions. That's when their navigation systems started prioritizing the signal source. The Voran AI interpreted the continuous audio transmission as a persistent emergency signal. Standard protocol requires navigation systems to track and approach the source of emergency transmissions for rescue operations. The lead cruiser's navigation computer began calculating the signal's point of origin, which was the station's communication array. The ship's course adjustment thrusters activated automatically as the system initiated standard approach procedures. The lead cruiser's AI interpreted the song as a critical command sequence. The continuous rhythmic pattern and consistent vocal delivery matched certain aspects of Voran command code structures. The AI's pattern recognition systems identified similarities between the musical structure and standard navigation command sequences. This caused the system to assign higher priority to the signal's content. The navigation computer began processing the audio as if it contained embedded command instructions masked within the transmission. It ordered the ship to pursue the transmission at maximum thrust. The navigation system issued course corrections that aligned the ship's bow directly toward the station's communication array. Engine output increased to maximum military power as the ship accelerated toward the signal source. The automatic systems overrode manual control because emergency protocols give AI priority during distress situations. The crew attempted to regain control but found their input secondary to the AI's emergency response routines. How is Never Gonna Give You Up used as a weapon? It exploits the Voran AI's programmed obedience to emergency signals, turning their protocols against them. The humans didn't attack the ship's defenses or weapons. They attacked the decision-making systems that governed the ship's behavior. The song's particular audio characteristics triggered pattern recognition responses in the AI that caused it to misinterpret the transmission. The continuous nature of the broadcast kept the emergency channels active, preventing the AI from reverting to normal operation. The effectiveness stemmed from understanding Voran's psychological programming. Their military systems emphasize automatic responses to certain stimuli to ensure rapid reaction during combat. The humans identified that this strength could become a vulnerability if someone understood how to trigger those responses inappropriately. They didn't need to break through security or defeat encryption. They simply needed to provide the right stimulus to make the system work against itself. This approach reflects a fundamental difference in tactical thinking. Most species develop weapons to overcome enemy defenses directly. Humans develop methods to make enemy systems fail on their own terms. They look for the underlying assumptions in design and find ways to turn those assumptions into weaknesses. The Rick Astley protocol wasn't about the song itself, it was about understanding how the Voran AI would process any continuous emergency. Transmission, the cultural aspect, added an additional layer of psychological impact. Using a piece of popular music from their own history demonstrated a level of confidence that affected both the human crew and any Vorans who recognized what was happening. It showed they could weaponize even their cultural artifacts when necessary. This psychological dimension amplified the tactical effect by adding an element of cultural defiance to the technical exploitation. The lead cruiser continued its acceleration toward the station. The navigation system maintained its course lock on the communication array. The ship's weapon systems remained active, but unfocused as the AI prioritized the emergency approach procedure. The crew's attempts to override the automatic systems became increasingly desperate as the distance closed. Their control inputs were being processed as secondary commands behind the AI's emergency response protocols. Then the first ship exploded. Let me tell you about the silence after the battle. The station's emergency lights still flashed crimson, but the alarm systems had fallen silent. The viewport showed only drifting debris where 3 Voran battlecruisers had been minutes earlier. No energy weapons fired, no torpedoes streaked through the dark. The only sounds came from environmental systems and the quiet breathing of personnel on the observation deck. That silence felt heavier than any battle noise I'd experienced in 20 cycles of service. It was the silence of paradigms shifting. 3 Voran battlecruisers gone, destroyed by training equipment and chemistry. The tactical displays confirmed the complete destruction of all 3 vessels. No escape pods launched. No distress signals transmitted after the initial engagement. The wreckage pattern showed catastrophic structural failure consistent with internal explosions. The battle assessment system struggled to categorize what had happened. Their databases contained no records of training facilities defeating capital ships without dedicated weapons. The destruction metrics didn't match any known weapon signatures in galactic archives. Commander Vex 9's hands shook as he reviewed the sensor logs. I stood beside him at the command console watching the playback. His normally steady fingers trembled against the touchscreen interface. He rewound the battle recording multiple times, focusing on different aspects each pass. He watched the chemical drones approach the intake vents. He studied the communication logs showing the music transmission. He analyzed the thermal readings from the initial combustion sequences. Each review made his hands tremble more noticeably. His breathing became shallow and rapid as he comprehended the totality of what had occurred. The damage assessment report scrolled across his screen with impossible statistics. 98% vessel destruction across all 3 ships. 0 human casualties. 0 station defensive systems employed. The weapons used didn't exist in any armory inventory. The tactics employed didn't appear in any military manual. The entire engagement defied every standard metric for space combat assessment. I watched him access the classification database with newly respectful movements. His fingers, now steadier, navigated the species categorization system with deliberate care. He bypassed the standard threat assessment protocols that had initially placed humans in Category 2. His movements showed none of the dismissive speed he'd used during their initial classification. Each menu selection, each data entry, each confirmation tap carried weight and consideration. He treated the process with the seriousness of someone rewriting fundamental assumptions. He didn't just upgrade their status. He created a new category entirely. The classification system offered options from Category 1 through 12. each with specific criteria and sub-designations. None of these fit what he had witnessed. He initiated a command override and opened the administrative creation tools. His fingers moved across the interface, building a new classification framework from scratch. He defined new parameters, established new assessment criteria, and wrote new operational guidelines. The system accepted his credentials without question, but the creation process took several minutes of concentrated effort. That's when he said the words that would change galactic diplomacy forever. He finished entering the final parameters and turned toward the observation deck personnel. His voice carried with unusual clarity despite the still active emergency lighting. He announced the creation of Category X with the formal tone of a declaration that would be studied for generations. His words echoed through the silent chamber, each syllable measured and precise. The designation carried implications that every experienced officer immediately understood. Category X, species whose capabilities require continuous reassessment. The definition appeared on the main display as he spoke. The text explained that these species demonstrate adaptive potential that defies static measurement. Their threat assessment cannot be fixed at any point, because their capabilities evolve faster than assessment protocols can track. The classification requires permanent observational status with real-time updating of threat parameters. It acknowledges that any current assessment represents only a temporary snapshot of their potential. Their threat level isn't measured in weapons, but in creative adaptability. The new classification criteria focused on innovation capacity rather than destructive power. It measured ability to repurpose available resources rather than weapon yield statistics. The assessment protocols evaluated problem-solving flexibility under constraints rather than technological advancement. The system now prioritized documenting novel applications of existing technology over cataloging dedicated weapons systems. This represented a complete reversal of standard galactic military science principles. Why reclassify humanity as Category X? Because their potential is limitless, and their restraint is the only thing preventing total dominance. The assessment finally acknowledged what we had witnessed. Their ability to turn training equipment into weapons demonstrated that any technology they encounter becomes a potential weapon system. Their use of basic chemistry showed that even simple compounds become tools in their hands. Their manipulation of communication protocols revealed that they understand systems better than the system's creators. Their restraint in using these capabilities only when necessary indicated conscious control rather than limitation. The classification system updated across the galactic network instantly. Every military installation, diplomatic outpost, and research facility received the new designation. Security protocols automatically adjusted to the new threat parameters. Observation requirements increased to constant monitoring status. Information sharing protocols initiated across all Federation species. The ripple effects would take cycles to fully manifest, but the immediate change was absolute. Humanity now existed in a category of their own making. Then the humans asked for more cadets. Colonel Chen approached the command platform as the classification update completed. She showed no reaction to the new designation or the still smoldering wreckage outside. Her expression remained neutral as she made the request. She didn't ask for weapons technology or territorial concessions or resource allocations. She requested additional training slots for human personnel across all academy programs. The simplicity of the request contrasted sharply with the implications of what we'd just witnessed. You know what a methane oxygen fire looks like in vacuum? Absolutely terrifying. I watched through the main viewport as the lead Voran cruiser's atmospheric processors reached critical mass. The catalyzed compounds the humans had introduced spread through the ventilation systems in precise concentrations. The chemical mixture interacted with the ship's methane-oxygen environment, exactly as designed. The reaction began near the engineering section where atmospheric processing occurred. It started as a faint glow visible through viewports along the ship's spine. The catalyzed compounds reached critical mass in the lead ship's atmosphere processors. The potassium permanganate and glycerol mixture achieved optimal dispersion through the environmental systems. The chemicals met in the main circulation hubs where fresh atmosphere gets distributed shipwide. The reaction initiated simultaneously across 17 separate ventilation zones. Thermal sensors showed temperature spikes occurring in perfect synchronization throughout the vessel. The combustion process began as a controlled reaction that rapidly accelerated beyond containment thresholds. Voran safety systems detected the contamination and sealed the compartments. Emergency protocols activated automatically when sensors identified uncontrolled chemical reactions. Bulkhead doors slammed shut between ship sections to contain the threat. Atmosphere vents closed to prevent oxygen feeding the reaction. Standard procedure calls for isolating affected areas until emergency teams can neutralize the hazard. The systems worked exactly as designed for containing typical fires or atmospheric contaminations. They weren't designed for a fire that used the atmosphere itself as fuel. I watched the fireball roll through the ship like a living thing seeking oxygen. The initial containment measures actually made the situation worse. The sealed compartments created perfect conditions for rapid pressure buildup. The fire found oxygen reserves in the atmospheric tanks and life support backups. It moved through ventilation shafts with terrifying speed, finding fresh fuel in each new section. The blue-white flames showed intensity beyond any normal combustion process. They burned with a chemical hunger that ordinary fires don't possess. It burned with a blue-white intensity that overloaded our sensors. The thermal imaging systems on the station automatically dialed down their sensitivity. The fire's core temperature exceeded standard measurement ranges. Radiation detectors spiked as the combustion process released energy across multiple spectra. Optical sensors struggled with the light intensity, their automatic filters engaging to prevent damage. The fire's color indicated complete combustion occurring at temperatures that should have been impossible in shipboard conditions. That's when the secondary explosions began. Fuel lines, weapons cache, engine core. The intense heat reached critical systems that weren't part of the initial reaction. Fuel transfer lines running through the ship walls heated beyond their tolerance points. Their contents ignited and added conventional explosions to the chemical fire. The weapon storage compartments cooked off as temperatures penetrated their armor shielding. Plasma torpedoes detonated in their launch tubes, adding directed energy to the chaos. Finally, the main engine core containment failed under the thermal stress. The lead cruiser came apart in a series of violent expansions. The initial explosion tore through the midsection where atmosphere processing occurred. Secondary detonations rippled along the weapons array on the port side. The engine core breach created the final catastrophic failure that fragmented the entire structure. Debris field expanded outward at high velocity, creating navigational hazards throughout the battle area. The ship's destruction was so complete that rescue operations weren't even considered. The second ship moved to assist, flying directly into the chemical cloud. Standard Voran fleet doctrine calls for ships to support each other during emergencies. The second cruiser initiated a rescue approach pattern toward the expanding debris field. Its course took it directly through the area where chemical residues hung in space. The microscopic particles from the first drone deployment remained suspended in the battle zone. The ship's environmental systems activated to handle potential contamination from the debris field. Its own atmosphere processors sucked in the catalyzed particles. The intake vents pulled in space debris along with the chemical residues. The filtration systems processed everything according to standard contamination protocols. The potassium permanganate and glycerol particles entered the environmental processing units. They mixed with the methane-oxygen atmosphere in the same proportions that destroyed the first ship. The reaction began exactly as before, starting in the atmospheric processors and spreading through ventilation. Why did the lead cruiser explode in a fireball? Because the humans turned the Voran life support into a distributed incendiary device. They didn't attack the ship's defenses or armor. They weaponized the one system every ship must maintain to support its crew. The atmospheric requirements that kept Vorans alive became the mechanism of their destruction. The humans understood that life support represents both necessity and vulnerability. Their strategy demonstrated that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to understand what they need to survive. The second ship experienced the same rapid combustion sequence as the first. The fire spread through its ventilation systems with identical efficiency. Emergency containment measures again worsened the situation by creating pressure vessels. Secondary explosions followed the same pattern of fuel lines and weapons cooking off. The destruction occurred slightly faster than the first ships because the crew was already at battle stations rather than attempting damage control. The ship fragmented into a second expanding debris field. The efficiency of the destruction demonstrated careful planning rather than lucky accident. The humans had calculated the exact chemical ratios needed for optimal combustion. They'd studied Voran ventilation patterns and atmospheric flow rates. Their drone deployment placed the chemicals exactly where they would achieve maximum distribution. The entire operation showed precision targeting of environmental systems rather than random sabotage. They turned life support into a weapon with mathematical precision. Meanwhile, the third ship chased the music into the disposal system. The continuous broadcast of 20th century music still gripped its navigation systems. The AI maintained course toward the signal source despite the destruction of its sister ships. The automatic systems overrode all manual control attempts as emergency protocols demanded. The ship accelerated toward what it interpreted as a persistent distress signal, requiring immediate response. Its trajectory took it toward the station's waste processing facility. The final thing I learned is that humanity doesn't want subjects. The council reconvened in the main chamber amid the lingering scent of ozone and scorched metal. The viewport still showed drifting debris from the Voran ships, backlit by distant stars. High Chancellor Vorlag himself made the offers personally, his vocal membranes vibrating with formal diplomatic tones. He presented the standard victory concessions: territorial claims in 3 star systems, mining rights to 6 resource-rich asteroid belts, and a permanent seat on the military high command. The offers represented the traditional rewards for military success in galactic politics. Every species that had ever assisted the Federation had accepted similar terms. They refused everything except the right to protect more civilizations. Colonel Chen stood before the council with that same unsettling calm she'd maintained throughout the battle. She declined each offer with precise diplomatic language that left no room for negotiation. Her rejection of territorial claims cited interstellar stability concerns. Her refusal of resource rights referenced economic balance preservation. Her dismissal of the high command seat pointed to conflict of interest considerations. Each refusal was polite, reasoned, and absolutely final. The only thing she accepted was expanded operational authority to defend other species. I watched Colonel Chen look at the star map with something like hunger. The main display showed the known galaxy with thousands of inhabited systems, blinking in soft light. Her eyes moved across the spiral arms with an intensity I'd never seen in diplomatic settings. She didn't gaze at resource-rich clusters or strategically valuable nebulae. Her attention focused on border systems, newly discovered civilizations, and regions with unstable political situations. She studied the map like a physician examining a patient's chart, identifying areas requiring immediate attention. She didn't see conquest. She saw vulnerable points needing defense. Her fingers traced along the rimward expansion zone, where 7 new species had recently achieved spaceflight. She noted the quarantine sector where the photic plague had wiped out 3 civilizations in the last cycle. She highlighted the unaligned systems where pirate factions operated beyond Federation control. Each gesture indicated a place requiring protection rather than exploitation. Her approach to galactic geography focused on weakness rather than strength, need rather than opportunity. That's when she requested all available candidates, not just warriors. She turned from the star map and addressed the council with a new proposal. Instead of additional military resources or advanced technology, she asked for expanded training quotas. But not just for combat personnel. Her request specified engineers, programmers, historians, economists, and cultural specialists. She wanted linguists who could decode unknown languages, sociologists who could understand alien cultures, and ecologists who could analyze foreign environments. The list covered virtually every academic and professional discipline from their homeworld. Their engineers, programmers, historians, all became part of the shield. The human delegation explained how each specialty contributed to their protective capabilities. Engineers could fortify structures against unknown threats. Programmers could develop security systems against unfamiliar technologies. Historians could identify patterns in aggressor behavior across species and cycles. They described a comprehensive defense network that relied on diverse expertise rather than concentrated firepower. Their approach treated protection as an intellectual challenge rather than a military exercise. They're building a defensive network based on understanding, not superiority. The briefing material showed their conceptual framework for galactic security. Instead of overwhelming force, they emphasized predictive analysis. Rather than stronger shields, they developed better threat identification systems. Their models focused on preventing conflicts through early intervention, rather than winning wars through superior technology. They argued that true protection comes from comprehending dangers before they manifest, not reacting to them after they appear. What does it mean that the universe became safer and more dangerous? The human approach created a fundamental shift in galactic security paradigms. Civilizations willing to coexist peacefully gained powerful protectors who understood subtle threats. Species that relied on aggression faced opponents who could turn their own biology and technology against them. The humans didn't make the galaxy safer by eliminating conflict. They made it safer by making aggression unacceptably risky. They created an environment where peaceful development became the most rational choice for survival. Their presence established new rules of engagement that favored defense over offense. Potential aggressors now had to consider that any technology might be used against them. Their own environmental systems could become weapons. Their communication protocols could be turned into traps. Their military doctrines could be analyzed and countered by specialists who studied historical patterns. The humans made warfare mathematically unfavorable for attackers, while providing robust protection for defenders. The Council approved their expanded candidate program with minimal debate. The Voran attack had demonstrated the effectiveness of their methods. The destruction of 3 battlecruisers without conventional weapons proved their approach worked. The decision represented the most significant shift in galactic defense strategy in centuries. It acknowledged that sometimes the best protection comes from understanding rather than overpowering. Then they started singing that damn song again. The human cadets gathered in the recreation area as the council session concluded. Someone produced a portable audio device and the familiar opening beats filled the room. They sang along with the recording, their voices mixing in casual harmony. The sound echoed through the corridor where council members were still discussing the implications of their decisions. The Vorlag delegation actually flinched at the first notes, their ear membranes flattening against their skulls. The humans showed no awareness of the reaction they caused. They just kept singing while studying star charts and technical schematics, their voices carrying through the station like a promise and a warning. The galaxy now understands that humanity's greatest power is choice. Colonel Chen revealed they operate at just 10% capacity, their restraint a deliberate tactic rather than limitation. Their control allows observation while concealing true capabilities until necessary. Their protection mission stems from this disciplined approach. They assess before acting, understand before engaging. Their weaponization of simple technology and cultural artifacts demonstrates creative adaptability beyond conventional metrics. You'll never hear an old pop song the same way again, knowing its potential within their strategic framework. Their strength lies in choosing when to unleash it.